Cowboys Nation, this changes everything. What we just witnessed in Seattle isn't just a preseason win, it's a statement that could define the entire Dallas Cowboys season, and you need to hear this breakdown right now because the defense you just watched might be the most dangerous unit this franchise has fielded in years. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and smash the notifications bell because we're bringing you daily Cowboys updates, breaking news, and insider analysis you won't find anywhere else. Trust me, you're going to want to be here for what's coming next. Alright, let's talk about what just happened at Lumen Field because if you watched that game against the Seattle Seahawks and felt like something fundamentally different was happening with this Dallas defense, you weren't hallucinating. That feeling wasn't just preseason optimism or training camp hype bleeding into your judgment. What you witnessed was real, it was tangible, and it was absolutely electrifying. The Dallas Cowboys defense just walked into one of the loudest stadiums in professional football, faced off against the defending Super Bowl champions on their home turf in front of their own screaming fans, and absolutely suffocated them. We're talking 7 points allowed, 156 total yards of offense, and get this, just 49 net passing yards. Let me say that again for the people in the back. 49 net passing yards against a Seattle offense that just won the Lombardi Trophy. Now, before we dive deep into the X's and O's, before we break down every single player and every scheme adjustment, we need to talk about what this means for the Dallas Cowboys moving forward. This organization has been searching for defensive identity ever since the glory days, cycling through coordinators and philosophies, trying to recapture that dominant swagger that defines championship teams. And what Christian Parker just showed us in one preseason game is that the search might finally be over. This isn't about one game or one performance. This is about a vision becoming reality right before our eyes. Parker is 34 years old, making him the youngest defensive coordinator in Dallas Cowboys franchise history, and he just outcoached the defending Super Bowl champions in their house. Think about the pressure that comes with that title, the expectations, the microscope that comes with being the defensive play caller for America's team. And Parker didn't just survive that spotlight, he dominated it. But let's rewind to the very beginning of this game because the opening snap told you everything you needed to know about where this defense is headed and what kind of mentality these players are bringing to the field. Picture this moment. The Cowboys defense takes the field for the first time in the 2026 preseason. There's nervous energy, there's excitement, there's that preseason buzz where everyone's trying to prove themselves and make the roster. Seattle breaks their huddle, Drew Lock lines up under center, takes the snap, drops back into his pocket, and before he can even go through his full progression, Seattle Neville Jr. is right there in his face, breaking on the football, getting his hands on what could have been a pick six on the very first play from scrimmage. Not the fifth play, not after the defense settled in, the very first snap of the entire preseason. Now I want you to really understand the significance of what almost happened there because this is a moment that reveals so much about where Neville is mentally and physically right now. This is a kid who's essentially entering his first real full NFL season after a rookie year that was completely derailed by injury. Remember, Neville played just 7 games as a rookie, never fully healthy, playing through a torn ACL recovery with a knee brace strapped on, never truly comfortable in his movements, never able to showcase the explosiveness and instincts that made Dallas draft him in the first place. He spent that entire season trying to find his footing while dealing with pain and limitations that would have broken lesser players. And then this offseason, he finally got healthy. He finally got to train the way he wanted to train. He got to attack training camp without restrictions, without limitations, without that mental hesitation that comes with playing on a surgically repaired knee. And what did he do? He stacked dominant practice after dominant practice at Oxnard. The coaching staff noticed. The beat writers covering the team noticed. Guys like Micah Parsons were talking about Neville in interviews, saying he looked like a completely different player. The hype was building all summer long. But here's the thing about training camp hype. It's just hype until you prove it in a real game environment. Practices are great, but when you step onto an NFL field against another team's offense with real game planning and real execution, that's when we find out if the hype was real or just manufactured optimism. And Seattle Neville answered that question on the very first play of the game. He came out of that huddle like a man possessed, like someone who had spent the entire offseason visualizing this exact moment. And he nearly took the first pass of the preseason to the house for a touchdown. That's not nerves, that's not feeling out the competition. That's a cornerback who knows exactly who he is and what he's capable of doing at this level. Now here's where the story gets even better. After that play, after Neville nearly intercepted Drew Lock on the opening snap, Christian Parker pulled him from the game. Some people watching might have thought that was strange. Why are you taking out your corner after one play? Did he do something wrong? Is he hurt? But if you know football, if you understand how coaches evaluate players, You know exactly what Parker was doing. He was protecting his investment. He was saying, "I've seen enough. I know you're ready, and I'm not going to risk you taking an unnecessary hit in a meaningless preseason game when you just showed me everything I needed to see." That's a defensive coordinator who believes in his player, who trusts what he's been seeing in practice, and who isn't going to expose his best corners to injury risk when the evaluation is already complete. And this matters so much because Neville has been in a legitimate competition all training camp with Cowboys Durant for the starting cornerback spot opposite Jordan Lewis. These aren't just two random guys fighting for snaps. These are two talented young corners who both believe they should be starting, both putting in elite work at practice, both making plays. And Durant didn't even suit up for this Seattle game, so Neville had the stage completely to himself. He had the opportunity to make a statement without anyone else competing for attention, and the first thing he did was nearly score a defensive touchdown. If you're Cowboys Durant watching that game from the sideline, you know the competition just got a whole lot harder. If you're Christian Parker drawing up your depth chart, you just got confirmation that Shamaron Neville Jr. is ready to be a starter in this league. That one play might have ended a position battle before it even really started. But the individual brilliance of Neville wasn't even the most impressive thing about this defensive performance. What really had me jumping out of my seat, what really showed me that this defense is built on a foundation that can sustain success, was a sequence that happened later in the first half that I genuinely believe is the most underrated stretch of football from the entire game. Seattle has the ball, and they're driving into Dallas territory. They've got some momentum going, the offense is starting to click a little bit, and they're pushing toward the red zone trying to put points on the board. For most defenses, especially in preseason when you're playing backups and guys fighting for roster spots, this is where things fall apart. This is where the discipline breaks down and offenses start to score. But the Cowboys' defense absolutely shut the door, and it wasn't just that they stopped Seattle, it was how they stopped them that reveals everything about what Christian Parker is building. First, Jordan Lewis, who's playing nickel corner but has the mentality and aggression of an outside linebacker, comes screaming downhill and stops a running play completely cold. Perfect angles, perfect timing, perfect execution. Then on the very next play, Julius Woods, a safety who's fighting for his roster life, knifes through traffic and makes a massive tackle right at the goal line to prevent what would have been a Seattle touchdown. 2 plays, 2 different defenders, same result. The Seattle run game goes absolutely nowhere. Then on 3rd down, the Cowboys stuff another run attempt for 0 gain, forcing 4th down. Now Seattle has a decision to make. They can kick a field goal in a preseason game that doesn't matter, or they can go for it and try to punch it in. They decide to go for it. Jalen Milroe, who's an incredibly athletic quarterback with legitimate scrambling ability, takes the snap and tries to create something with his legs because the pocket is collapsing. And Isaiah Land, a linebacker who has been through absolute hell to get back to this team, comes flying through and absolutely devours Milroe for a 14-yard sack. 14 yards. That's not just a sack, that's a momentum killer, that's a drive ender, that's a statement. Let me tell you about Isaiah Land for a second, because his story is one of the most compelling narratives on this entire Cowboys roster. This is a guy who came into the league with massive hype, a player everyone thought was going to be a star, and then the injuries happened, the setbacks happened, he got cut, he went to the waiver wire, he had to fight and claw his way back onto this team. There were moments where it looked like his NFL career might be over before it ever really started. And now here he is, making the single biggest defensive play of the game on 4th down to kill a drive that could have completely changed the complexion of the first half. That's not luck. That's not a guy who just happened to be in the right place. That's a player who's been through adversity, who's had to prove himself over and over again, coming through in the clutch because he understands the value of every single opportunity. And let's talk about Julius Woods for a minute, because this man deserves all the recognition in the world for what he did on that goal line stand. Going into this game, the Cowboys' safety room was absolutely loaded with talent. You've got established veterans, you've got young guys who flash potential, you've got competition at every level. Some safeties didn't even dress for this game because there literally aren't enough spots to get everyone on the field. Woods knew that this was his moment. He knew that if he didn't make a play, if he didn't separate himself from the pack, his chances of making this roster were going to take a serious hit. So what does he do when his number gets called? He shoots through traffic like a missile and makes a touchdown-saving tackle at the goal line. That's not a guy who's unsure of himself. That's a player who prepared for this exact moment and executed when it mattered most. That 3-play sequence right there, Lewis flying downhill, Woods making the goal line stop, Land destroying the quarterback on 4th down, that's a perfect snapshot of what Christian Parker's defensive philosophy is all about. It's not about having 1 or 2 superstars who carry the entire unit. It's about having depth, discipline, and players at every level of the roster who buy into the system and make plays when their number is called. When your third and fourth string safeties are preventing touchdowns and your bubble roster linebackers are dropping quarterbacks for 14 yards on fourth down, that tells you the culture is real. That tells you the coaching is elite. That tells you this defense has a foundation that can sustain success even when injuries happen or starters need rest. Now let me hit you with some statistics that are going to blow your mind, because when you look at the numbers from this game, it becomes crystal clear that what we witnessed wasn't a fluke or preseason randomness. The Dallas Cowboys defense recorded 3 sacks, 5 quarterback hits, 5 tackles for loss, forced 2 3-and-outs, and got 2 fourth-down stops. Seattle averaged 3 yards per play, 3 yards. Their offense couldn't get anything going through the air or on the ground. And that 49 net passing yards number I mentioned earlier, let that breathe for a second. 49 net passing yards against an NFL offense, even in preseason, is absolutely suffocating. That's the kind of performance that defensive coordinators dream about, the kind of game that gets played in film sessions all season long as an example of perfect execution. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're saying, well, hold on, let's pump the brakes a little bit. DK Metcalf didn't play. Jackson Smith-Njigba wasn't out there. Seattle's starting offense only played a few series, and you're absolutely right. Those are fair caveats, and we should acknowledge them. But here's the thing. The defending Super Bowl champions don't have a weak roster top to bottom. Every single player who stepped on that field is fighting for an NFL job, fighting to prove they belong, fighting to show coaches they deserve playing time. These aren't college players or practice squad nobodies. These are professional athletes who just won a championship and are trying to stay on that roster. And from the opening whistle to the final gun, the Dallas defense dominated them. And let's talk about adjustments, because this is where Christian Parker really showed me he's the real deal. That opening drive for Seattle, they marched down the field and scored a touchdown. It was ugly, it was sloppy. The Cowboys had penalties that extended the drive, and Dallas gave up 7 points. For a lot of young coordinators, especially in their first game-calling plays, that could spiral into panic. You start overthinking, you start making drastic changes, you lose trust in your system. Parker did the exact opposite. He made his adjustments immediately, communicated them to his players, and Seattle didn't score another point the rest of the game. 0. The adjustments worked before Seattle even got another meaningful possession. That's a coordinator who trusts his preparation, who communicates clearly under pressure, and who doesn't let one bad drive become a trend. Schematically, Parker ran his multiple front concept exactly the way he's been teaching it all training camp. You saw 3-4 looks, you saw 4-2-5 nickel packages, you saw shifting fronts from play to play that kept Seattle's offense guessing. They never got comfortable. They never found a rhythm, and that matters so much because Seattle runs a Mike Macdonald-influenced system that is specifically designed to exploit defenses that are predictable and static. If you line up the same way every play, if your front doesn't change, offenses like Seattle will pick you apart. Parker kept them off balance all game long. That's sustainable success. That's not just individual talent winning one-on-one matchups, that's scheming players open and putting them in positions to succeed. Now let's talk about Malachi Lawrence, because the 23rd overall pick in the 26th draft had a really interesting debut that showed both the immense potential and the expected growing pains of a rookie edge rusher. Lawrence came into this game listed 3rd on the depth chart behind some established veterans. He's still learning the NFL game, still developing his pass rush moves, still understanding how to process information at the speed that professional football demands. This was his first real NFL action ever, not a practice, not a scrimmage, a real game against another team, and you could see both sides of his development on full display. On one hand, Lawrence was active and disruptive all night. He was generating pressure, he was getting into the backfield, and Christian Parker was moving him around to different positions along the defensive front to test his versatility. That's huge for a rookie. Parker isn't just pinning him to one spot and saying rush the passer. He's teaching him multiple alignments, different responsibilities, varied techniques. That versatility development early in his career is going to pay massive dividends down the road, because if Lawrence can line up at multiple spots and be effective, defensive coordinators around the league are going to have nightmares trying to scheme against him. On the other hand, there was one play where Lawrence got caught inside, didn't maintain his gap integrity, and Jalen Milroe read it perfectly and scrambled for a nice gain. And that's okay, that's expected. This is exactly what preseason is for. He's a 23-year-old rookie playing his first NFL game against a mobile quarterback who makes experienced defenders look silly. One blown assignment isn't a red flag, it's a learning opportunity. You take that play, you watch the film, you understand what went wrong, and you don't make that mistake again. The talent is undeniable, the physical tools are elite, the processing speed will come with experience. Malachi Lawrence is going to be a problem in this league, just give him time to develop. And while we're talking about players who made an impact, we need to discuss Tyrus Wheat right now, because this is a name that you need to learn and remember. Wheat, with help from Jordan Lewis crashing from the nickel position, brought down Jalen Milroe for a 9-yard sack. 9 yards on a quarterback who is known for his elusiveness, who can extend plays with his legs, who makes defenders miss in the open field. That's really impressive. In Christian Parker's defensive system, where pressure is generated by scheme and not just by individual talent, where multiple players are expected to contribute to the pass rush, guys like Tyrus Wheat are going to thrive. He doesn't need to be a household name or a Pro Bowl edge rusher. He needs to be disciplined, execute his assignment, and when the opportunity presents itself, finish the play. And that's exactly what he did. Closing on a mobile quarterback and bringing him down 9 yards behind the line of scrimmage is textbook execution in a defense that demands exactly that. But let's keep it completely real for a second, because this is Cowboys Reality Check, and we don't sugarcoat things just to make you feel good. Not everything was perfect in this game. There were some serious issues that need to be addressed before the regular season starts. And the biggest issue on the defensive side of the ball was Kelvin Joseph and his penalty problems. 3 flags in the first half alone, a pass interference, a face mask, and a defensive holding penalty before halftime even hit. That's not a small problem, that's a major red flag. The pass interference on the opening drive helped gift-wrap Seattle's only touchdown of the game. Dallas committed 5 penalties in the first quarter alone, and Joseph's flags were a significant part of that mess. In Parker's defensive system, where cornerbacks are asked to play in various alignments, sometimes in man coverage, sometimes in zone, sometimes pressed up, sometimes playing off, penalties are absolutely devastating. You give offenses free yardage, you extend drives that should be dead, you take pressure off the quarterback who otherwise would have had to make a difficult throw into tight coverage. Now, Joseph also made some good plays in this game. He had a pass breakup that showed his ball skills and awareness, but 3 penalties in one half of preseason football is brutal for a third-year corner who's going up against backup receivers. If you're fighting for a roster spot in a cornerback room that includes guys like Trevon Diggs, Jordan Lewis, Shemeron Neville, and Kobe Durant, you cannot be giving away drives with undisciplined play. That's the honest assessment, and I'm not going to soften it to make anyone feel better. Kelvin Joseph needs to clean up the penalties going into the second preseason game against Arizona. If he's still flagging in week 2, that roster conversation gets a lot more difficult when final cuts come around. I'm not writing him off completely, he's got talent and he's made plays. But discipline matters, and right now the penalties are a serious concern that could cost him his spot on this team. The opening touchdown drive was ugly from a penalty perspective across the board. Joseph's pass interference extended the drive early, and on the actual touchdown play, the 5-yard dart from Drew Lock to the tight end, there was another defensive pass interference flag thrown that Seattle declined because they scored anyway. So on one single scoring drive, you had multiple defensive backs getting flagged for penalties. That's a lot of mistakes on one possession for guys who are fighting for their NFL lives. But here's what impressed me. After that drive, after giving up 7 points and committing all those penalties, the Cowboys defense locked down completely. They didn't allow another point, 0. Whatever was said on the sideline, whatever adjustments Christian Parker made, it worked immediately. That's what you want to see from a first-year defensive coordinator. Not perfection, but rapid response to problems. The ability to adjust quickly and get your players refocused. Let me bring this all together and tell you why this game matters so much for the Dallas Cowboys moving forward. Christian Parker is 34 years old, the youngest defensive coordinator in franchise history. He spent 7 years in the NFL coaching defensive backs. His last stop was Philadelphia, where he watched elite cornerbacks dominate in man coverage and learned how to maximize talent in the secondary. He came to Dallas with a specific vision and a clear system. Be multiple, keep offenses guessing, make quarterbacks uncomfortable before the snap happens and not just after. And last night against the defending Super Bowl champions, every single one of those principles showed up on the field. You saw multiple fronts that kept Seattle off balance. You saw varied pressure packages that generated 3 sacks from different players. You saw depth players making critical plays from the first snap to the final whistle. That's not an accident. That's not preseason luck. That's a defensive coordinator who has his players completely locked into the system from day 1 of installation. Now I'll say this clearly. It's one preseason game. One game. We're not handing out Super Bowl trophies in August. But when your proof of concept looks like 49 net passing yards and 156 total yards against a championship caliber roster, you have to pay attention. And when you start thinking about what this defense could look like when Micah Parsons is rushing the passer every down, when Trevon Diggs is healthy and locking down his side of the field, when Neville and Diggs are both starting on the outside, when Malachi Lawrence is fully developed and unleashed alongside the veteran pass rushers, the ceiling on this defense becomes genuinely exciting. This isn't hype. This isn't me being a blind homer. This is honest football analysis based on what we saw with our own eyes. Christian Parker has built something real in just a few months. The foundation is legitimate, the culture is being established, the scheme is sound. And if the development continues, if the injury luck holds, if the young players keep improving, this Dallas Cowboys defense could be special. Not good, not solid, special. Cowboys fans have been waiting years for a defense they can trust in big moments. We've seen talented units that couldn't get stops when it mattered. We've seen coordinators who couldn't adjust in the playoffs. We've seen defenses that looked great in September and fell apart in January. What Christian Parker showed against Seattle was a defense that's physical, disciplined, multiple, and deep. Those are the characteristics of units that can sustain success over a full season and into the playoffs. The second preseason game is coming up on August 23rd when Dallas travels to Arizona to face the Cardinals. And here's what I want to see from this defense in that game. I want to see Shamaran Neville get more meaningful snaps and continue building on the foundation he established with that near interception. I want to see Malachi Lawrence clean up that gap integrity issue and keep developing his feel for NFL speed. I want to see the penalty problems get corrected because 13 flags as a team is completely unacceptable, and that sloppiness will kill you in the regular season. And I want to see Isaiah Land get another opportunity to prove he belongs on this roster, because if he performs in Game 2 the way he dominated against Seattle, the linebacker conversation gets very interesting very fast when roster cuts come. The work is far from finished. One preseason game doesn't define a season, but the blueprint is being drawn right before our eyes. The culture is being built brick by brick, and what we witnessed at Lumen Field was the first chapter of what could be a historic season for the Dallas Cowboys defense. Christian Parker's vision is becoming reality. The players are buying in, the scheme is working, and Cowboys Nation should be absolutely fired up about what's coming. This defense has officially arrived, and we're just getting started. Now it's time for the offense to hold up their end. It's time for Dak Prescott and that explosive receiving core to put points on the board and give this defense some breathing room. If both sides of the ball can play at an elite level, this team has legitimate Super Bowl potential. Let's ride, Cowboys Nation. The season is almost here, and it's going to be special.